I am the parent of two teenagers. See, I gave that a little pause to see if what just happened would happen. Mere mention of teenager, it does something to us. I have found that a common response to "I have two teenage daughters" is a kind of carefully measured condolence, followed by some form of "don't worry, it gets better," like in a whispered hush. Yeah. And I have appreciated that, trust me, for we need each other in this, and we need the condolences, and we need the hope. Rearing teenagers takes strength and grit, attention, resilience. Oh, resilience. It for sure requires a sense of humor. Otherwise, you are sunk. Many say that you need to have thick skin. There have been days where only an impenetrable bunker feels like it will do. They are the easy butt of jokes, teenagers. And they have been typecast in literature, television, and film as the perpetually brooding, oblivious, rebellious, and totally unreasonable character. And that's rooted in some fact, right? This is not all that they are, but there is some truth, of course. And you don't have to be a parent or caregiver to teenagers to relate to any of this. After all, you once were one, weren't you? Lest you have blotted it from your memories. I think if you want to bridge divides between people, simply ask them if they'd like to go back to middle school or high school. I think many of us can agree on the no thanks. I'll take a pass. Why is this? Why is this age so hard to live through and to live with? There's been an enormous amount of research and study in the field of neuroscience dedicated to this stage of development in recent years. With the remarkable technology of magnetic resonance imaging, MRIs, scientists are now able to produce detailed images of the brain in living humans and the mysteries of the distinctive teen brain and the brain of those in their early 20s, right? Kind of spans through, it doesn't just end at 20. With structures and behavior different from that of either child or adult. These are gradually being revealed and understood through this imaging. For example, did you know that brain imagery shows that physical danger for teens arouses less fear in the brain than self-consciousness? This has to do with what scientists are now calling exuberant brain growth during adolescence, which points to a highly exaggerating and astonishing neurological need for belonging over physical safety. Embarrassment literally feels life-endangering because it threatens what? Relationships, a feeling of connection or belonging to a group. That is the underlying terror beneath self-consciousness. So fascinating, right? I mean, it explains why it is so many teens go to such painful, often dangerous lengths to fit in somewhere, belong somewhere. And why it is, I would say, that our well-intentioned, high and mighty lessons about not caring what others think just falls flat every time. Of course, there's a lot more to say about neuroscience and adolescence and the massively wide spectrum of teen brains. We are not one-size-fits-all beings. I am being painfully simplistic here. But I want to stay with this astonishing neurological need for relationships and belonging piece, like your life depends on it. That I want to stay with. Because while our brains do settle and calibrate, and we slowly, hopefully, evolve into more resilient, autonomous, and authentic beings, ones whose livelihoods and serenity are not hinged upon acceptance by others at any cost, we are still, as human beings, reliant upon a sense of belonging and relationship. Our thriving depends upon it. Our thriving still depends upon it. I would say that we're literally hardwired for it. So as many of you know, maybe it comes with the job, but I do spend a lot of time thinking about words, not just because I love to read and I love to write, but because they help put my mind in sync or ordered with or around meaning making. I think that's how I would articulate why words matter so much to me. They help put my mind in sync, ordered with and around meaning making. And church really helps with this. The spiritual life helps with this. Words take on a whole new shape and color here. I called them earlier kind of these funny, strange words we use, right? So continuing with how we consider the words we use in this space. For example, on days and nights where renters arrive to hold concerts or events, it's a theater. This is a theater, or a music hall, right? Yet when we arrive here on Sundays or on Vesper nights, it becomes our sanctuary, right? It's a sanctuary, a place of holy peace and healing, a sacred shelter, a sanctuary, where we bring our joys and our sorrows, our loneliness, our need for belonging, our whole selves. Sanctuary, sanctuary. And we place these objects, as we talked about earlier, symbols that are imbued with these needs and what we arrive with, we place them on our altar, which only yesterday was a table conveniently used to house brochures and programs for the recital that took place here. But today it's our altar, home to all that we hold most dear in our hearts and faith. This whole area up here yesterday was the stage, right? But today we call it a chancel, which is a special, somewhat funny word for the area beneath and surrounding the altar, literally revolving around it. That's what a chancel is. That's all. This setup in here, what we place on the altar, what we hang on the walls, of our sanctuary, the design of every object and its placement, all of it speaks to something important. For it tells you what we as Unitarian-Universalists, as spiritual pilgrims and companions, worship. There's another wonderful, funny church word whose ancient etymological roots translate into considering things of worth, worship, considering things of worth, What I love about this simple translation of an often fraught word, worship, is that it puts the onus on us, right? For what, just what, do we worship? What is of the greatest of worth to us? Hold that for a minute. Church and temple architecture just fascinates me for this very reason. The very design of these structures, they're theological in nature. What do you believe in that is bigger than you? What do you worship? And they tell those stories, right? Our Protestant and Puritan ancestors used to place the pulpit so high, front and center, and way, way up there, because the preached word inspired and brought to you by God through the man, the minister, was what was worshipped. God and man at the pulpit on high, right? Have any of you ever been inside or seen pictures of the Unity Church just outside of Chicago? Yeah. Okay, so you know where I'm going with this. So the famous Unitarian architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, he designed that UU church. His father was a Universalist minister, and he identified with the humanists and transcendentalists of the late 1800s and early 1900s. This was his theology and his belief system, and it mirrored a lot of the Midwestern Unitarian churches' theologies of the time. He built many churches in that area. And when he was commissioned to design this church, the Unity Church, or Unity Temple, it's often called, he infused it with this theology. That's what we do when we build these structures. So Unity Church was a place, in his words, to unite all beings as one with a divine presence. All beings as one with a divine presence. So its pews are set in the round, and the pulpit is on the same level. You often, when you look at it, you kind of have to take a moment to even find where the pulpit is. And even the materials that he used to build it, Wright said, would be organic in nature, untreated, imperfect, and perfect, just like us humans. He wrote, "Bring out the nature of the materials, let their nature intimately into your scheme. Reveal the nature of wood and plaster, brick or stone in your designs. They are all by nature friendly and beautiful, just like us humans." What do we worship? What is of the greatest worth to us? So we've already spent some time thinking about that as we added things to our altar this morning with our young ones and talked a bit about our chalice and those candles. But let us sit for a moment with what we feel is of the greatest of worth to us here in this church. And I've thought a lot about this. I spent a lot of time here in the sanctuary this week thinking about it. And I would say that what this space says about what we worship, what our altar says about what we worship, is that it's all about welcome and relationships, belonging, connection to one another. Who are you and how are you? A circle, literally and symbolically, that's trying to love big, trying. And that divinity is cultivated in these relationships in this sense of belonging, just as we are. And so I want to get back to a question I asked earlier. I asked why it was that so few of us would want to be a teenager again. And I also asked why that age is so hard to live with. And there are a lot of answers to those questions. But the one I'm sitting with this morning is this. For me, one of the most painful and wondrous things, painful and wondrous, about rearing teenagers, being in their presence, and once being one, is the ever-present, teetering on the edge, terrifying knowledge that at any moment, those circles of belonging can and probably will crumble. They are most often built on sand. One minute you're in, and the next you're out. And for many of our young ones, for many of us, we never were in, not really. It's a harsh world that our teens live in and live through, and what heartbreak this is. To witness, to live near and through, to be in the presence of such tenuous belonging. What a tender and raw human truth to be faced with. It is at its core the most tender and raw human truth and need, right? And being in its presence is the most painful of things, because it reveals in us a need and truth. And so it is also the most wondrous. Ain't that a kicker? Because it cuts to the core, right? It removes the armors we walk around wearing that trick us into believing that we need no one. Slows our pace to a standstill, opens our eyes, breaks open our hearts to the root of this thing called life, that our lives and livelihoods depend upon belonging, depend upon love. And this kind of love is a dance, right? Feeling beloved for who we are and knowing ourselves as beloved, both. That's that fierce embrace that our poet today seems to be trying to get at. Finding our center, for this is our theme this month, is this kind of dance with love. Inner, outer, and it's worth worshiping, don't you think? So this is some aged wisdom that we all fumble our way through as the years go by. But the teenaged brain and experience has wisdom to offer as well, that our lives depend upon this love for ourselves and with and for one another, that our lives depend upon it, that the stakes are high. And so I hope you will consider some of this in the coming days and weeks, what you worship, what you consider as having the most worth in your life. Maybe you want to build an altar for it so that you can see it and feel it, experience it every day. Ask yourselves, how did you come by it? How do you honor it? How do you neglect it? How do you articulate it with words? Can you? How do you share it and share in it? How do you, as Mary Oliver writes, stay attentive to it? Stay attentive to it, attentive to what we worship. That's the beauty of consistently looking around our spaces and saying, is this still what we worship? And if it isn't, usher it out with some dignity and thanks. I so hope that you will consider joining a chalice circle. Their very purpose, as Elizabeth has already shared with us, is cultivating this kind of witnessing and attention and sharing and connection and belonging. These are the hopes of small group ministry, which is what chalice circles are, that inner and the outer, the dance, that sweet spot between the two. And I hope you will make this a priority like your life depends upon it. For it does. It does. So in closing, I want to return to David White's beautiful words again. They capture all of this so well. Self-portrait. Self-portrait. It doesn't interest me if there is one God or many gods. I want to know if you belong or feel abandoned, if you know despair or can see it in others. I want to know if you are prepared to live in the world with its harsh need to change you. If you can look back with firm eyes saying, this is where I stand. I want to know if you know how to melt into that fierce heat of living, falling toward the center of your longing. I want to know if you are willing to live day by day with the consequence of love and the bitter, unwanted passion of your sure defeat. I have been told in that fierce embrace that even the gods speak of God. Blessed be